I didn't grow up surrounded by music. I was surrounded by strange instruments. My mother was a nurse, and we had this room in our house that had all these strange medical instruments.
What if the most famous voice of the 80s vanished? Not in scandal, but in silence. One moment, she was the high priestess of cool, her songs echoing from every car radio and corner bar. There's a quiet mystery that begins this story. How did a voice so effortlessly smooth and steeped in emotions suddenly disappear? Why did Sade, the woman who delivered classics like Smooth Operator and The Sweetest Taboo, vanish from view? That question floats at the heart of everything, and it's what keeps you leaning in. From the very first note, her music carried elegance, but behind that velvet tone lay a yearning she never voiced, until now. Imagine her earliest days in Ibadan, Nigeria, sunlighting laughter, smells of fresh earth, an existence full of promise. That world shattered at age 4. Her parents parted, and she boarded a boat to England with her mother and brother. One day you're greeted by warm spices, the next you're trudging through dreary Essex pavements. No fanfare, no welcoming committee, just gray classrooms and the sudden sting of homesickness. In that hush, she discovered something vital. Invisibility could be armor. Sade, born Helen Sade Adu, became a shadow in school corridors. Her name sounded foreign. Her voice carried an accent caught between two worlds. She learned silence early. Watch, listen, protect. But beneath that silence was a spark. Between her roots in Africa's exuberance and England's restraint, something unexpected took shape. That fusion later became the secret behind her voice. Haunting, intimate, brimming with unspoken longing. That tension became her signature. Wait until you hear how it all connected. Skip ahead to London's art schools. She studied fashion and design, sketched silhouettes that echoed her inner landscape, but notice how she remained unseen. Modeling gigs came and went. Studios watched. She played roles, never center stage. Then came a daring leap, singing backing vocals with a small funk band named Pride. No expectations, no auditions, just another chance to whisper. Then came a night on a pub stage when something shifted. In that tight, low-ceiling club, smoke drifted, drums tapped softly, and she began to sing. Not a full song, just a fragile hum. Then slowly, Smooth Operator emerged, raw and half-formed, spilling into the crowd like a confession. Conversation stopped. Time paused. Studio scouts leaned in, sensing what she already knew. Her voice carried gravity. It didn't scream. It beckoned, and in that pull was power. That moment marked the birth of a star who refused to perform in bright lights. She wanted honesty. When Diamond Life debuted in 1984, the world wasn't ready. But something in those songs, Your Love is King, Smooth Operator, felt timeless. The album went global, platinum across continents. Then came Promise in '85, Love Deluxe in '92, Lovers Rock in 2000, and Soldier of Love in 2010. Each record arriving on its own timeline, each album like an emotional photograph. They were commercial triumphs, millions sold, Grammys won. But even as her fame surged, she clung to the margins, refusing the glare. She always moved in shadows, though success tried to reposition her in the spotlight. Tabloids and gossip columns loomed. Her silence became headlines. Cold diva, they sneered. Aloof, unapproachable. Rumors circulated. She'd secretly given birth. She'd squandered her fortune. She splurged on lavish purchases. But none of it was real. Just noise drowning out what truly mattered. The sincerity in her voice. Critics dissected her glances in interviews. A playful grin was reframed as disdain. A pause was turned into arrogance. She once said, in rare defense, "I came to think that those tape machines would just scramble what you say like a blender." That wasn't defiance, it was heartbreak. After all, she had spent a lifetime striving to be heard, only to have her voice twisted. Meanwhile, life was evolving quietly off stage. She married Spanish director Carlos Pliego in 1989, and by 1996 welcomed her son, Isaac Theo Adu. She withdrew into privacy, building a home in Gloucestershire's countryside, away from studios and tabloids, renovating a humble cottage by hand. When her child came out as a trans man in 2016, she stood unwaveringly by him. In 2024, she surprised fans with Young Lion, a song released as part of Red Hot's Transa compilation. It wasn't just new music, it was an apology, a confession, a creation of healing. The music video offered raw glimpses of Sade and Isaac through decades, ending with a tender beach embrace. No flashing cameras, no production polish, just mother and son, real and unvarnished. Hook after hook, her narrative pulls you deeper. She reminds us that artists aren't just their music, they're humans made of wounds, joys, adjustments. From quiet beginnings to global acclaim, she chose introspection over spectacle. But here's the twist. After decades of strategic silence, she's now weaving her privacy into her art. What does that say about where she's headed next? Fans and critics sense a shift. In 2022, she quietly visited France's famed Miraval Studios, the same estate where Promise and Stronger Than Pride were born. Rumors whisper of a new album, the seventh Sade record, conceived in hidden sessions between olive groves and studio echoes. The world speculates if her last album dropped in 2010, and before that in 2000, where does a return in 2025 place her? It's the kind of slow burn tease only she could master. Every choice is intentional. Every silence speaks louder than words. Meanwhile, artists across generations continue to drop references to her influence. Drake got tattoos of her visage. Kanye wore her band tee. Kalela covered Like a Tattoo, calling it a template for intimate music in my life. Through these nods, her legacy endures. She never chased relevance. She simply embodied timeless emotion. And in that, she transcends time. But where does that leave the woman herself? At 65, she appears ageless, Brit tabloids gushing, "She looks like she's not aged a day." Yet she still lives as she always has. Quietly, intentionally, shaped by her choices and built on illusion-free honesty. The cottage, the countryside, the selective projects, they're all part of a design. She's never just making music, she's curating her life. The moment her success began to feel hollow, the trophies no longer glinted, they echoed emptiness. Recognition had validated her artistry, but it also peeled back layers she never wished to show. She found herself celebrated yet doubted, admired yet misunderstood. That tension wasn't just creative fatigue, it became a crisis of identity. In America, fans embraced the warmth in her tone, but back home in Britain, a rift formed. Media outlets started to question her intentions. Invitations to interviews dried up, and she slipped back from public view. Her voice, so intimate once, carried an unexpected edge of caution. Every lyric, every nuance, seemed coated with protection, a barrier against further invasion. And the stage? It didn't feel like home anymore. With success had come an unexpected vulnerability, and walking into the spotlight now felt like entering a minefield. But that soaring moment of global fame? It turned out to be just the beginning of her deepest unraveling. Hidden behind platinum plaques was a woman fighting back against a wave of misrepresentation. Images she never authorized. Rumors spread without her consent. Headlines forgot that real human being whose songs carried unfiltered emotion. She had chased authenticity, only to find herself stripped of it in gossip columns and editorial spin. Before long, she retreated into silence. Her marriage to Carlos Pliego dissolved quietly, and she found solace with Jamaican producer Bob Morgan. Intent on finding refuge, they moved to Jamaica, but tragedy shadowed the sunshine. One humid evening in Montego Bay, local police stopped her. Without explanation, passport confiscated, dignity on the line, she was accused of reckless driving and disorderly conduct. Charges she'd later dismissed as officials manufacturing a story after she refused to pay a bribe. The arrest became tabloid fuel, a global star reduced to a traffic story in a small Caribbean town. That incident marked more than legal trouble. It cracked her sense of safety. She left the island at dawn, retreating from a dream turned nightmare. She vowed never to return. What had been a haven became a source of fear. Back in England, the silence she once valued became oppressive loneliness. But that solitude was soon shattered by conflict closer to home. Paul Cook, a former drummer from her early days in Pride, filed claims seeking songwriting credits and royalties. He argued he co-wrote hits like Smooth Operator and Your Love is King. The fight dragged on from the mid-1990s into 2023, 2 decades of legal wrangling. Experts even suggested Cook might have contributed to the music's structure. Suddenly, the studio sessions she remembered fondly became evidence in a courtroom. Her past, the pubs, the jam nights, the creative spark, was now a series of transcripts and exhibits. She arrived at court hearings dressed in composure, but inside felt exposed. Memories of hope were replaced with sterile interrogations. Session contribution disputed in January 1993. Authorship claimed November 1982. Documents and depositions replaced jam sessions, her creativity reduced to clauses and credit percentages. It was a surreal unhinging of identity. Could cold paper records ever capture the soul behind the music? All the while, she carried more than legal briefs. She held motherhood at the core. Her son, born in Jamaica during that tumultuous period, became her anchor. Private recordings, demos scribbled in notebooks at midnight, and lullabies sung at the edge of sleep. They didn't need audiences. Each melody whispered resilience. She moved beyond the spotlight, recentered herself as mentor, creator, mother. This legal fight wasn't just about money. It was a reckoning of her legacy, her authenticity, her very history. Those years passed not in silence, but in creation. Small, personal, defiant. Even as Cook's lawsuit finally resolved, some claims dismissed, others settled, the emotional scars lingered. She didn't return to public life immediately after. There were no stadium tours or award shows. Instead, she kept recording quietly in attics and home studios. Songs were written more for healing than for chart success. Every note carried the weight of survival. At every low point, there was an inner voice that refused to bend. She didn't agree to press statements or media tours. She allowed her music to speak, but only when it felt right. She taught her son that integrity wasn't a soundbite. It was silence when no one was watching, bravery when no one applauded. Nights weren't always easy. In the stillness of her home, empty, echoing, she wrestled with the legal reminders of her past. A room that once held accolades now contained only the questions. Who gets to define your story? Who decides where your truth ends and theirs begins? But in the darkness, she also discovered her resilience. Each court document filed, each deposition given, reaffirmed a core belief that while creation can't be stolen, its meaning can be. So if they demanded her story be told through contracts, she would tell it through silence and through music. The result? She returned not with spectacle, but with quiet potency. When Lover's Rock came out in 2000, a celebration of her Jamaican refuge amidst past hurt, it felt like coming home to herself. It wasn't radio pop, it was intimate, reflective, soulful. And in every lyric you sensed the woman who'd been tested, who'd learned that some scars, though hidden, shape you forever. She stepped back onto her own terms, never rushing, never bending. Her later return in 2010 with Soldier of Love didn't chase trends. It reflected survival, faith, and honesty. She showed us that withdrawing isn't quitting. It can be preparation. She learned that the deepest art sometimes grows in the dark. She's been my greatest ally in every growth spurt, not just in my transition. Isaac's words land heavier than any trophy Sade ever received, revealing a shift from applause to protection, glamour to genuine guardianship. She chose refuge over recognition, nightlights over spotlight years ago, and her son's journey became far more than mere narrative. It became her sacred purpose. What's remarkable is how she let herself fade, not out of shame, but out of an unwavering belief that his story deserved the spotlight, while hers stayed quiet. That choice wasn't weakness, it was a profound, almost radical act of love. There were nights when she replayed every word she'd spoken to Isaac, wondering if she'd done enough to mend his world. In those moments, her fame melted away, and she became simply a mother kneeling in a kitchen, dimly lit by a single bulb, holding a child whose wounds felt like her own. Yet alongside that vulnerability, there were acts of silent strength. She taught him to replant a shattered garden as a metaphor for renewal, to carry hope in every seed. She whispered soft lullabies while brushing his hair, turning fragile moments into rebirth. Her absence from public life was not erasure, it was resurrection of authentic connection. During those years grounded in grief and growth, Sade wasn't dormant. She evolved into a guardian whose love was louder than any microphone could ever reach. Her legacy was no longer measured in platinum albums, but in the person standing beside her, fully himself, rooted in dignity and grace. And then, when the moment felt right, she confirmed what we'd been waiting for. She returned, but not for fanfare. In 2010, she released Soldier of Love, a record born from years of quiet artistry and resilient creativity. Critics called it haunting and unfiltered. To fans, it felt like an old friend stepping back into your living room. The title track landed with a slow-burning intensity, confirming what we all hoped. Her voice had never faded. The world listened, and tickets for her tour sold out within hours. But here's the hook. The tour never became a spectacle. It was a communion, a shared breath in dim arenas where her silences spoke as loudly as her notes. And true to form, after those concerts, after every encore, she disappeared once more. No interviews, no follow-up releases, no press tour. "I live by my own rhythm," she said once. Such words became her manifesto. She didn't step back because she had nothing left to say. She receded because she had everything to protect. Today, Sade is rooted in her restored Gloucestershire farmhouse, far from urban clamor. She shares this life with Ian Watts, a former Royal Marine turned chemist, and their loyal dogs. They're off-grid by choice, tending the soil, tending their own lives. That reclaimed farmhouse, along with a stone cave cottage nearby, is her sanctuary, a place where gold records have no place on the walls, and peace is the only decoration. Ian's gentle presence anchors her world, his grounded nature a perfect counterbalance to her soulful legacy. She still drives a vintage BMW, preferring its simple mechanics to new-age gadgets. No flashy supercar, just reliability and quiet elegance. Her home isn't adorned with ostentation, and yet in that simplicity lies its own kind of luxury. She's the rare celebrity who owns without ostentation, who commands influence without performance. Her impact endures across generations. Beyoncé, Alicia Keys, Frank Ocean, The Weeknd, all cite her as a muse not just for her sound, but for her self-possession and refusal to compromise. In an era when attention is currency, she teaches us that sometimes choosing to live off-screen is a statement more powerful than any headline. Now, a closer look at Sade's luxury and financial arc. Over her career, she's invested in tangible assets, real estate like her Gloucestershire farmhouse and London residence, opting for a private jet. There's no sign. Insurance policies? Likely comprehensive, safeguarding her career, health, and artistic legacy. She's known to collect vintage BMWs, valued not for badge value, but for trusted design. Her brand deals, rare and selective, lean toward collaborations that align with her aesthetic integrity. Inside industry circles, she's quietly praised for fair business. Songwriting credits earn even splits with her bandmates, and early collaborators reportedly received financial support without fanfare. Here's the financial takeaway. Sade built wealth by balancing artistry with restraint, minimal releases, strategic touring, ownership rights, and a lifestyle underpinned by frugality. She's proof that wealth can be sustained through consistency, authenticity, and long-term vision rather than volume or visibility. That's the rare lesson many celebrities overlook in the age of oversharing. As the final note in this 3-act story, ask yourself, what legacy do you want? Is it the loudest clap or the quiet whispers that endure through time? Sade didn't vanish. She circled back to herself, to her values, to the core of what she created, art that doesn't beg but simply exists. And in choosing peace over performance, she reminds us that sometimes true power lies in what you don't say. Sade's journey isn't just the story of a singer, it's the quiet rebellion of a woman who refused to let fame define her. At the height of her success, when the world wanted more hits, more headlines, more of her, she chose something else. Peace, privacy, purpose. Her path was never shaped by spectacle but by soul. She walked through betrayal, legal battles, and heartbreak, yet emerged not bitter, but whole. She built a world where music became medicine, motherhood her masterpiece, and silence her sanctuary. And in doing so, Sade didn't fade. She became timeless. A legacy not of noise, but truth. In a world obsessed with constant noise, she whispers a truth that lingers long after the mic is down. The most profound triumph isn't applause, it's authenticity. Sade didn't just redefine music. She redefined what it means to live on your own terms. From sold-out tours to quiet farmhouses, from global fame to a mother's unwavering love, her story is less about disappearance and more about transformation. In a world that demands noise, she chose silence and turned it into strength. If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. Hit like, subscribe.